The needle that measured terror had never once fallen. In 400 years of the Deep Call Institute it climbed always, no matter the species strapped to the resonance cradle, climbed and spiked and pinned itself red while the subjects' hearts came apart. Now Resonance Master Vathan Sel stood over the console and watched it drift the wrong way, down and down, as if the instrument had grown bored of its own work. "Recalibrate," he said. "The cradle is faulted." Behind him, the chamber was already loud. The ninth register's opening movement rolled out of the emitters in a low structural moan, the sound that had been engineered vertebra by vertebra to convince a nervous system it was already inside a mouth. Vathan had helped build it. He knew what it did to the Than, to the Velthari, to the armored Oskin who feared nothing that walked. He had watched it fold a war captain into a shaking knot in under a minute. The human on the cradle exhaled through her nose and let her head tip sideways against the restraint. "Master," his acolyte Eme had gone still at the second console, both hands flat on the readout as though to hold it down. "The cradle isn't faulted. The pickups are clean. Her cardiac rate is—" Eme's ear fans flattened. "It's dropping." "Dropping toward what?" "Toward sleep." Vathan crossed to the second console and put his own hand over the readout, feeling the trace stutter under the membrane of his palm, the small, honest vibration that no display could fake. The human's 2-beat pulse had slowed from the sharp, frightened clip they'd logged on intake to a long, loose, unhurried fall. The interval between beats was widening. Her breathing had lengthened. On the wall, the terror needle sat below its rest peg, in a register the Institute had never bothered to print numbers for, because in 400 years no one had needed the numbers below fear. "Increase to second movement," Vathan said. Eme did not move. "Master, the protocol says we hold first movement until the subject." "The subject is a grade Umbranine Deathworlder acquired at the cost of an entire recovery flotilla," Vathan said, "and the Prime Warden arrives in 9 days to watch it break. Increase to second movement." The emitters deepened. The second movement of the ninth register brought in the layered predator band, the collected apex skulls of 11 death worlds woven under the structural moan, each one a sound that some living thing had spent 1,000,000 years learning to run from. It was the part that broke the brave ones. It had a texture to it, a wet closeness, the suggestion of breath on the back of the neck. The human's shoulders came down off the restraint, the tension went out of her hands, her mouth softened. "Play the whole thing," she said. Her voice was thick and slow, and it took Vathan a moment to understand she was speaking to them, and another moment to understand what she'd said. The chamber's translator caught up and printed it across his console in cool script, "Play the whole thing." And then, a beat later, because she'd said more, "I haven't slept right since you people picked MEUP." Eme made a sound Vathan had never heard him make. "She is deceiving the instrument," Vathan said, though he did not believe it as he said it. Deception had a signature. Fear suppressed on purpose left fingerprints all over the cardiac trace, the held breath, the clenched gut, the fear leaking out sideways as the body fought itself. There were no fingerprints here. There was only a small, dirty animal on his cradle, going soft all over, the way a body goes when nothing in the room means it any harm. He had spent his life listening. He knew the difference between a creature that had mastered its terror and a creature that had never felt any. "Bring the third movement," he said, and his own voice sounded strange to him. They had taken her off a courier hull 9 days out from the contested reach, a small human running cargo too close to a conquered picket, and the recovery had cost more than she was worth on any ledger the Institute kept. Warden Osk had wanted a soldier. What the flotilla brought home was a salvage pilot named Ren Kazil, 24 standard years, 160 centimeters of nothing in particular, a narrow, tired face, cropped dark hair gone greasy in captivity, a scar through one eyebrow old enough to have stopped mattering, dirt worn so deep into her knuckles that the medical team had first logged it as pigment. The Institute's charter did not require a soldier. The charter required a Deathworlder, any Deathworlder, of the species catalogued in the Deep Registry as Grade Umbra, the grade reserved for worlds whose own apex line had driven itself, over and over, into escalating arms of tooth and venom and cunning, until the survivors were things that other biospheres could not have produced and would not have survived meeting. Most Umbra grades were empty. Most Umbra worlds had eaten their own candidates before those candidates learned to build a boat. 9 had not. 9 had put its horrors in ships and sent them out among the calm worlds to run cargo and haul salvage and, apparently, sleep badly. Vathun had read her intake the way he read everything, listening for the shape under the words, uncooperative but not violent. Answered questions with questions, ate what she was given without complaint, and then asked, twice, whether there was anywhere quieter to be kept, because the ventilation on the holding tier ran at a pitch that kept her awake. A predator that could not sleep for the hum of a fan. He had noted it and thought nothing of it. He was thinking of it now. Third movement, Imes said and swallowed. Master, the third movement is the Koran recording. I know what the third movement is. On an unbroken subject we have never. On an unbroken subject we have never had a needle below the rest peg, Vathun said. Play the Koran recording. The Koran recording was the oldest and worst thing the Deep Call Institute owned. It had come out of a derelict 200 years gone, salvaged from a Velthari science hull that had died at a place called Koran Deep, with every crew member curled in the corners of their compartments, unmarked, unstarved, simply stopped. The hull's logs held one file playing on loop. No one knew what made the sound. It had no visible source in the galactic catalog of throats and no match in any registry of living things. It was low, lower than the 9th register's structural moan, low enough that the smaller conquered species felt it in the water of their own bodies before they heard it, and it rose and fell in long, slow sweeps like something enormous turning over in a dark too deep for light. The Institute had built the entire 9th register program around it. It was the sound at the bottom of every nightmare they sold to the War College. It was the reason the Prime Warden was coming. Ime played it. The Koran sound came up under the chamber, and the floor took it, and the resonance cradle took it, and the small dirty human strapped to the cradle took it, and something crossed her narrow face that Vathun's whole trained life told him to read as the beginning of the break. The moment the deep fear finally found the bottom of a soul and started pulling it inside out. She smiled. Not a baring of the teeth. He knew the human threat display from the manuals, and this was not it. This was the other one, the loose, helpless one, the expression the intake team had flagged as social submissive, and the medics had flagged as pain masking, and both had been wrong. Her eyes had closed. Her face had gone slack and young and unspeakably, infuriatingly content, and the translator, catching her breath as it slowed toward the long rhythm of true sleep, printed the last thing she said before she went under. Whale. Vathun stared at the word. Master, Ime whispered, what is a? Cut the emitters, Vathun said. The chamber fell silent. On the cradle the human did not wake. She had gone the whole way down into the sleep that the 9th register was built to make impossible, into it as easily as a stone into still water. And now she lay in the ringing quiet of the Deep Call Institute's most terrible chamber with her mouth open and her breath coming slow. And Resonance Master Vathun Sel stood over her and felt, for the first time in 400 years of a discipline built entirely on other people's fear, the first cold edge of his own. He did not report it that shift. He told himself it was procedure. A single anomalous run proved nothing. The instrument might yet be faulted in a way that mimicked a clean trace. The subject might have a physiology that inverted the response through some Umbra world accident of the inner ear. He ran the numbers 3 times. The numbers said the human had heard the worst sound in the known galaxy, and it had put her to sleep like a hand on a child's back. He went down to the holding tier before the next shift, alone, which was against his own standing orders. The corridor lights had dimmed to the station's night cycle. Through the transparent wall of the cell he watched her sleep. She had been carried back and dropped on the pallet, and she had not surfaced, had only turned onto her side and pulled her knees up and gone on sleeping, deeper now than the ventilation hum had ever let her. And Vathan understood with a slow, crawling clarity that he had done her a kindness. He had brought her the one sound in the universe that let her rest. She woke while he stood there. Predators do that. Some animal shelf of her brain had counted the shift in the room's air and pulled her up out of the deep in one clean motion. No grogginess, her eyes open and already on him before the rest of her had moved at all. She looked at him through the wall for a long moment. Then she sat up, put her back against the cold plating, and rubbed her face with both dirty hands. "That was the best I've slept in months," she said. The cell's translator carried it flat and unhurried. "What was that last one, the low one that goes up and down?" Vathan found his own voice with difficulty. "That recording has no confirmed origin." "Sounded like a whale to me." She yawned wide, unashamed, and he watched the rows of a Deathworld predator's teeth appear and disappear in the dim. "Big one." "Blue, maybe. You can feel those in your chest before you hear them." She tipped her head. "Where'd you get it?" "It was recovered," he said, "from a vessel whose entire crew died listening to it." She thought about that. She did not look horrified. She looked, if anything, faintly sorry for the crew, the way one might feel sorry for someone frightened by a shadow. "Yeah," she said, "that do it if you didn't grow up with it. First time my cousin brought his girl out to the coast she couldn't sleep at all," said the ocean sounded like something breathing. "We grew up on it. You stop hearing it. It just means you're home." She looked at him with her tired, ordinary eyes. "You built something to scare people out of using a sound my whole planet sleeps to." Vathan did not answer. He turned and walked back up the corridor while the night lights ran blue along the floor. And behind him, through the wall, he heard the small Deathworlder lie back down on the pallet and within a minute begin again to sleep. The Deep Call Institute occupied the hollowed third moon of a gas giant the Conquered had named Sethan long before it had a war college or a prime warden or a need for weapons that killed without leaving marks. The Sethari had come up out of caves. Their homeworld had been a place of perpetual overcast and grinding stone, where nothing could be seen at any distance. And so they had learned to hear the way other species saw, to hear the shape of a room and the mood of a crowd and the lie under a word, to hear so well that they had built a civilization on it, and then a Conquered. And then, when the calm worlds needed defending from the loud ones, a science of hearing turned into a science of harm. The great fan membranes that spread behind a Sethari's skull were not ears in the way lesser species meant it. They were the organ around which the whole animal was arranged. Through them, a Sethari read the world and each other. Through them, the resonance masters of the Institute had learned to find the frequency at which any given nervous system began to doubt its own safety, and to hold it there and to press. It was clean work. It broke armies without breaking bodies. The War College loved it. A defeated fleet with its crews intact could be repatriated, ransomed, re-educated. A Conquered that could take a world by sound alone was a Conquered that spent no blood but the enemy's nerve. And at the center of it, the crown of 400 years of the discipline, the thing the Prime Warden was crossing half the reach to authorize, the 9th Register, and the offensive it was built for. They called the offensive Quietfall. Vathan had been in the briefings. Somewhere out past the contested reach, the humans had a cluster of border colonies. The Halcyon settlements, a string of thin new worlds strung along a trade filament the Conquered wanted and the humans would not sell. 6 colonies, perhaps 4 million Deathworlders, most of them farmers and haulers, and the kind of stubborn frontier stock that did not frighten and did not leave. The War College had modeled a conventional reduction of the Halcyon line, and did not like the numbers. Deathworlders in prepared ground were a butcher's arithmetic even for a Conquered that outnumbered them 50 to 1. So the Institute had offered Quietfall instead. Seed the colony atmospheres with resonance emitters. Wait for night. Play the ninth register over 4 million sleeping Deathworlders at once, at a volume the whole planet would feel in its teeth, and in the morning collect the surrender of a population that had spent the dark hours learning, all together, what real fear was. No marks, no dead, a humane weapon the briefing had called it, a mercy really compared to the alternative. 9 days from now the Prime Warden would sit in the observation gallery above the resonance chamber and watch a single Deathworlder break under the ninth register, and she would sign the order, and Quietfall would go to the fleet. Vathan stood in his quarters with the readout still glowing in his hand, and thought about 4 million Deathworlders lying down to the best sleep of their lives. He told the Warden in the morning. He had no choice. The Institute's chain of custody logged every run, and the run was already in the record, and if Warden Osk heard about it from the archive before he heard about it from Vathan, then Vathan's remaining years would be short and unpleasant. Warden Osk was Oskkin, one of the armored people, a slab of a creature whose species had been the conquered shield arm for 6 generations, and who had exactly no patience for the Institute's soft sciences even as he depended on them. He listened to Vathan's report standing, arms crossed over the natural plating of his chest, ear slits. The Osk barely had ears at all, another reason the ninth register worked on them better than most, angled with visible skepticism. It slept, Osk said when Vathan had finished. She slept, yes. Through the Koran recording. Into it, Vathan said. The Koran recording is what put her under. Osk was quiet for a moment. Then he made the low grinding sound that passed for Osk laughter and unfolded his arms. Your instrument is broken, Resonance Master, or the animal is. Either way you have 8 days to fix it before the Prime Warden arrives to watch it work, and I would spend those days fixing it and not telling me ghost stories. The instrument is not broken. Then break the animal, Osk said. The ordinary way, and salt whatever you have to salt to make the needle move when Tavish is watching. I do not care how the sound gets made, Resonance Master. I care that, when the Prime Warden looks at your cradle she sees a Deathworlder come apart, so that she signs the order, so that we take the Halcyon line without feeding my kin into a meat grinder for a filament of trade space. Do you understand the arithmetic here? I understand it. Then make the animal scream. Vathan looked at the Warden for a long moment. He was very old by the standards of his people, old enough to have curated the archive's worst editions with his own hands, old enough to remember when the Koran recording had first come into the Institute, and the whole senior staff had gathered to hear it, and one by one had left the chamber pale and quiet. He had spent his life certain of one thing above all others. That fear was universal, that it lived under every skin in the galaxy, that a mind clever enough to find the right frequency could reach into anything that lived and turn it inside out. It was the ground he stood on. It was the ground the whole Institute stood on. Warden, he said, you should hear it for yourself. They put Osk in the observation gallery, and Vathan ran the sequence again from the top, and this time he watched the Warden instead of the needle. The human had eaten. She was more herself now, less the exhausted thing off the flotilla, and when they walked her into the chamber and seated her on the cradle she looked around the room with the flat professional attention of someone assessing a workspace, cataloging the emitters, the consoles, the gallery glass, the 2 Institute guards with their tools. She let them fix the restraints without resistance. She asked mildly whether they were going to play The Good One again, and when the translator rendered it, Emez's ear fans flattened and one of the guards took an involuntary step back. Vathan opened the first movement. He watched Warden Osk through the gallery glass as the structural moan rolled out. He watched the Warden's plated shoulders climb toward his skull. He watched the ear slits clamp shut and the massive frame go rigid, and the 4 blunt fingers of one hand press flat and white against the glass. Osk, who feared nothing that walked, 6 generations of shield arm, sitting in a soundproofed gallery hearing only the leakage that came up through the structure of the moon itself, and hating it. He watched the human's shoulders come down off the restraint. By the second movement, Osk had turned his head away from the glass. By the third, by the Koran recording, the whale, the enormous slow thing turning over in the dark, the warden was on his feet with his back to the chamber, and the human was asleep. Her chin dropped to her chest, her breath long and slow, and the terror needle was pinned below its rest peg in the register with no numbers, and the only creature in the entire Deep Call Institute that the worst sound in the galaxy could not touch was the small, dirty Death Worlder dozing in its cradle. Vathun cut the emitters. In the ringing quiet he heard the warden breathing hard through the gallery's open channel, fast and shallow, the breath of an armored creature that had just been reminded it had a soft inside. "Turn it off," Osk said. It's off, warden." The channel clicked. When Osk spoke again, his voice had gone flat and careful, the voice of someone rebuilding himself one plate at a time. "Wake it up," the warden said. "The animal. Wake it up and get it out of my sight, and then you and I are going to go somewhere without that thing in the walls, and you are going to explain to me how the weapon we are about to point at 4 million of these creatures is the one weapon in the arsenal that makes them sleep." They took the human back to holding, and the two of them went up to the warden's ready room. High in the moon's crust, where the gas giant filled half the viewport in bands of amber and rust, and Osk poured himself a measure of something that his kind drank and did not offer any to Vathun, and for a while neither of them said anything at all. "I have heard it 40 times, Osk said finally. "In the gallery, filtered, I told myself the gallery was enough distance." He turned the cup in his blunt fingers. "It is not enough distance. Nothing is enough distance." He looked at Vathun. "And that thing slept through the full emission on the cradle." "She asked me to play it again," Vathun said. "Afterward, she wanted to know where we got the whale." "The what?" "It is her word for the Koran recording. She says it is an animal from her homeworld, a large one. She says the sound is—" Vathun searched for the translator's word and found it inadequate. "Restful. She says her people sleep to it. She says it means you are home." Osk set the cup down very carefully, as though it had become heavy. "Explain to me," he said, "how the deep sound that killed a Velthari science crew is a lullaby on a death world." "I have been trying to explain it to myself since last shift." Vathun crossed to the viewport and looked out at the banded storm of the gas giant, because it was easier than looking at the warden. "Consider what fear is, warden. Fear is not a sound. Fear is a memory the body carries, a debt owed to every ancestor that heard a certain thing and lived because it ran. When the 9th register works, it is not the sound that breaks the subject. It is the subject's own line of grandmothers, every one of whom survived long enough to breed by being afraid of exactly that. We do not put the terror in. We call it out. It is already there. We are only the ones who know the frequency. And the Death Worlder has no such grandmothers." "The Death Worlder," Vathun said slowly, "has the opposite. Consider it, warden. Consider a world that produced a grade Umbranine, a world whose apex line escalated so far, so many times, that the survivors are things we build weapons to deter. On such a world, what is the sound of a great predator in the dark? What does the body of a Death World infant learn, generation on generation, when it hears the biggest thing on the planet moving in the black beyond the fire?" Osk said nothing. His ear slits had opened again, listening. "On any calm world, that sound means death, and the body learns to void itself and freeze," Vathun said. "On a death world, that sound means the biggest predator is over there, occupied, not hunting, at rest. It means the night is ordinary. It means the fire is holding and the walls are holding and the thing in the dark is only turning over in its sleep. It means you are safe enough to sleep yourself." He turned from the viewport. "We did not build a weapon, warden. We spent 400 years assembling, at enormous cost, a recording of a death world's ordinary night. And now we propose to play it over 4 million Death Worlders and call it an attack." The ready room was very quiet. Out beyond the glass the storm turned. "You are certain?" Osk said. "No," Vathan said. "I am certain of one run. I am certain of one animal. I want 2 more days with her before the Primordian arrives, and then I will be certain, one way or the other, and so will you. But Warden—" He stopped. He was old and careful, and he had never in his life said a thing like what he was about to say to a member of the war arm. "If I am right, Quietfall does not fail quietly. If I am right, we do not play the 9th register over the halcyon line and get nothing. We play it, and 4 million Deathworlders sleep better than they have slept in years. And then in the morning 4 million Deathworlders wake up rested and curious and go looking for whoever installed the wonderful new sound over their colonies. And I would like you to think, Warden, with your 6 generations of shield arm, about what it means to ring a dinner bell over a nest of the only creatures in the galaxy our worst weapon cannot frighten, and then stand next to the bell." Osk looked at him for a long time. Then the armored warden, who feared nothing that walked, reached out and turned his cup upside down on the table, the old shield arm gesture that meant a plan was dead and would not be spoken of again. And Vathan understood that he had just made an enemy of the entire momentum of the War College, and that it did not matter, because Osk had made the same enemy in the same moment, and neither of them could unhear what they had heard. 2 days, Osk said. Be certain, and Resonance Master, keep the animal comfortable. If what you say is true, it is the most important prisoner the Conquered has ever taken, and it does not yet know it. Vathan did not treat the next 2 days as an interrogation. He had run enough interrogations to know that the human would give him nothing under pressure. Her intake had made that plain, and besides, he no longer wanted the thing an interrogation produced. He wanted the truth, and the truth, he had begun to suspect, was something the Deathworlder would simply hand him if he only had the sense to ask. He had her moved to a quiet cell on the crust tier, away from the ventilation hum, with a viewport. He had food brought that the medics said her physiology could use. And then he sat down across a table from Ren Kazil, with the entire archive of the Deep Call Institute loaded into a portable emitter, and he did the thing no Resonance Master had done in the history of the discipline. He played her the collection. Not as a weapon, as a question. "I am going to play you a series of recordings," he said. "I want you to tell me what each one is. Do you understand?" The human looked at the emitter, and then at him, and something moved behind her tired eyes that he could not read. "You're going to play me your scary sounds," she said, "and ask me what they are." "Yes." "Okay." She pulled her knees up onto the chair and wrapped her dirty arms around them, and for a moment she looked less like a grayed umbranine predator and more like something young. "Go ahead." He played the first recording. It was a catalog standard, the third-tier terror the Institute used to soften a subject before the deeper registers, a rising, wavering shriek, close and organic, the sound of a thing in pain that was also a thing that intended pain. It had made Velthari cadets weep. On the Deathworld registry it was filed as unknown predator, high distress. "Fox," Ren said. "Red fox, that's a vixen this time of year." She almost smiled. "Everybody thinks it's a woman being murdered the first time they hear it. It's just a fox. They scream to find each other." She tilted her head. "There's wood somewhere in that recording. You can hear the trees." Vathan logged it and played the second. Lower, this one. A series of deep coughing roars that climbed at the end into something enormous and territorial. It was a favorite of the War College. It tested very high on the Oskin. "Big cat," Ren said. "Lion, maybe, or a tiger, hard to tell without seeing. That's a male telling everybody the hill's taken." She rested her chin on her knees. "You'd hear that across a whole valley at night. Means he's fed and settled. It's when they go quiet you worry." Vathan's membrane went cold at that. "It is when they go quiet you worry." He logged it. He played the third and the fourth and the fifth. A screech that the Institute had recovered from a dead survey team and filed as a level 4 psychological agent, barn owl, Ren said. They nest in the rafters, you get used to them. A vast booming pulse that the Velthari had a religious terror of. Gator, she said. Bull gator, that's a love song, believe it or not. A chorus of overlapping rising drones that had emptied an entire evacuation shelter on a calm world when it played by accident over the address system. Cicadas, she said. And this time she did smile, wide and helpless and homesick. That's just summer. That's the sound of it being too hot to sleep. That's my whole childhood, right there. Recording after recording, the worst sounds the galaxy had, the collected nightmares of 100 calm worlds, the arsenal of 400 years, and the small dirty Deathworlder named them all, one after another, in the fond, exhausted voice of someone paging through the pictures of a home she had not seen in a long time. Not one of them frightened her. Several of them, he could see, comforted her. And with each one Resonance Master Vathan Cell felt the ground of his entire life tilt another degree, because he was not learning that the human was brave. He had catalogued brave species. Brave species still broke. Courage was only fear with a lid on it, and the 9th register lifted lids. He was learning something worse. He was learning that the sounds were not frightening, that they had never been frightening, that an entire galaxy had spent its evolutionary childhood terrified of the ordinary noises of one particular planet's ordinary nights, and had built a science of terror out of them, and had never once known where they came from. "Where are you getting all these?" Ren asked between recordings. She had unwound a little. She was leaning back now, watching him work the emitter. "Some of these I haven't heard since I was a kid. That last one, the loons, my grandmother used to say that was the lake saying good night." She rubbed her eyes. "You've got a whole planet in that box. You know that? You've got Earth in there." Vathan's hand stopped over the emitter. "Earth," he said. "My planet. Where I'm from." She looked at him, and some of the fondness went out of her face, replaced by the flat, careful attention he had seen when she first walked into the resonance chamber. "That's what all this is. That's not 100 worlds in that box. That's one. That's mine. Every one of those I could take you to the county it lives in." She was very still now. "How long have you people been collecting the sound of my planet, and why does it scare you so bad?" Vathan did not answer. He reached into the archive, past the catalog standards, down to the file at the bottom that the whole discipline was built around, and without letting himself think about it, he played her the Korun recording. The enormous slow thing turning over in the dark filled the little cell. It came up through the floor and the table and the chair, low and patient and vast, the sound that had killed a Velthari science crew and anchored 400 years of the Institute's terrible work. And across the table the Deathworlder closed her eyes, and her shoulders came down, and the fond, tired, homesick look came back over her narrow face like a tide coming in. "Blue whale," she said softly without opening her eyes. "Told you. Biggest animal that ever lived on my world, and it never hurt anybody. It just sings." She breathed out long and slow. "Where'd you find this one? This is a good recording, deep water. You can hear how far down it is." "A vessel," Vathan said. His own voice had gone very quiet. "A science vessel. The crew died listening to it. All of them. We found the recording playing on a loop in the wreck. We have never known its origin. We built," he stopped. "We built everything on it." Ren opened her eyes. She looked at him across the little table for a long moment, and the last of the homesickness left her, and what was under it was not anger and was not fear. It was something slower and more terrible than either, the look of someone doing a piece of arithmetic and not liking the sum. "They found a whale song," she said, "playing in the dark in the middle of space, a long way from any water, and it killed everybody on board. And you never asked how a whale song got out there." She sat forward. "You didn't collect this, Master. Somebody left it for you. Somebody put the sound of my planet on a Velthari science ship and let it play until the whole crew stopped, and then they walked away and let you find it. And you spent 200 years being scared of the recording, and never once got scared of the hand that made it." The cell was silent except for the whale, still turning over in the dark under everything, patient and vast in singing. "I don't know who did that," Wren said. "I want to be clear, I don't. That's not us, we don't even know you're out here, most of us. But somebody who knows my planet real well wanted you to hear the sound of it and be afraid, and it worked, and here we are." She looked at the emitter and then at him, and her tired, ordinary face was the most frightening thing Vathan had ever seen because there was nothing frightening in it at all. "You should turn that off now," she said gently. "It's going to put me to sleep, and you look like you've got more questions." Vathan turned it off. The whale stopped, and in the ringing silence of the little cell on the crust tier, 400 years of the Deep Call Institute quietly came apart in the mind of the man who had spent his life building it. Emeh had been an acolyte of the Deep Call Institute for 11 years, and had never once questioned the archive. And now the Resonance Master had given him a task that felt like being asked to take apart his own religion with a small tool. Cross-reference the archive against the recovery logs, every recording. Find where each one came from, not the calm world where it had done its damage, but the place it had first been captured, the origin the catalog had never cared about because the catalog only cared about effect. 400 years of acquisitions, 12,000 recordings. Emeh sat alone in the archive vault with the recovery logs spread across every surface and worked through the night cycle and into the next, and the more he worked, the colder the great fan membranes behind his skull became. He had assumed, as everyone assumed, that the archive was a collection of the galaxy's terrors, that the Institute's agents had ranged across 100 death worlds and calm worlds alike, recording apex predators in their native dark, building a library of everything that could make a nervous system despair. That was the story. That was in the founding charter. He had recited it to visitors. It was not what the log said. The log said that the Institute had recorded almost nothing itself. The log said that the overwhelming majority of the archive, the catalog standards, the mid-tier agents, the deep files, and the Quran recording at the bottom of everything, had not been captured by Sethari agents on any world at all. They had been recovered, from derelicts, from dead ships, from wrecks and abandoned stations and the black boxes of vessels that had died with their crews curled in the corners of their compartments, unmarked, unstarved, simply stopped. For 400 years, the Deep Call Institute had not gone out into the galaxy and collected fear. The galaxy had brought fear home to it, again and again, always the same way. A ship would be found dead, and there would be a recording playing, and it would be the sound of some animal no one could identify, and the Institute would add it to the archive and never, ever ask why a dead ship 1,000 light years from any ocean had been playing the song of a thing that lived in deep water. Emeh pulled the origin data on 40 of the worst files and ran them against the Deep Registry's Biosphere Index, the one no one used, the one that cataloged the actual animals of the actual worlds behind the grade designations. He did it because the Resonance Master had told him to, and because his hands had started shaking and he wanted them to have something to do. 38 of the 40 matched a single biosphere. Grade Umbranine, the Death World, Earth. Emeh sat very still in the archive vault with the number in front of him and understood, the way the Resonance Master must have understood in the cell, that the Deep Call Institute's entire arsenal, the science of terror that had let the conquered take worlds without spilling blood, the crown of 400 years, the weapon the Primordian was crossing the reach to bless, was a collection of the ordinary animals of one planet's ordinary nights, gathered not by the Institute's cleverness but delivered to it. Over and over on ships that died in the hearing, and that no one had assembled the collection. Someone had. Someone who knew the death world well enough to know exactly which of its ordinary sounds would empty the bowels of a ComWorld crew, and who had spent 400 years feeding those sounds to the Conquered's own terror scientists, one dead ship at a time, and letting them build a war college doctrine around a lie. He found the Resonance Master in the observation gallery above the empty resonance chamber, standing at the glass, looking down at the cradle where the human had slept. Master, his voice came out thin, I ran the origins. I know what you found, Vathan said without turning. You found that we never collected any of it. You found that it was given to us. 38 of 40, Imes said, from one world. Master, the Koran recording the Velthari science hull, the recovery log says the hull was found with its drive intact and its stores full and no sign of boarding or damage. The crew simply stopped, and the recording was playing. And there is a note in the recovery log, 400 years old, from the agent who found it. He held out the reader in a hand that would not stop shaking. Read the note, Master. Vathan took the reader. The note was short, in the cramped hand of a long-dead recovery agent who had gone aboard a silent Velthari hull and found a whole crew curled dead in the corners and one file playing on a loop, and who had written, before anyone had built anything on it, before it had a name. Recording was not origin of DEATHS. Recording began after. Someone set IT to play. Recommend caution. Whatever killed this crew wanted the next ship to hear this. 400 years, Vathan said quietly. Someone wrote us a warning 400 years ago, and we filed the warning and kept the sound. He set the reader down on the gallery rail. Below them the resonance chamber sat empty and enormous, ringed with the emitters that had cost more than most fleets, built to broadcast the loudest and most terrible sound in the known galaxy, which was the song a whale sang in deep water when it was content. The Prime Warden arrives in the morning, he said. And she is going to sit here in this gallery and watch us try to break a Death Worlder with the sound of its own home, and when it does not break, she is going to want to know why the crown of the Conquered's arsenal is worthless, and I am going to have to tell her that it is worse than worthless, that it is a bell, and that someone has been ringing it in our hands for 400 years to keep us pointed the wrong way. Imes's membranes had gone flat against his skull, pointed away from what Master? Vathan did not answer for a long moment. Down in the empty chamber the emitters caught the low light and gleamed. That, he said, is the question I am afraid the Prime Warden is going to ask the Death Worlder herself. Prime Warden Tavish arrived on the morning cycle with a staff of 9, and the unhurried gravity of someone who had never in her long life been made to wait for anything. She was old Sethari aristocracy, her fan membranes gone silver-gray with age and spread wide in the constant listening posture of her caste, and she had governed the War College for 30 years on the strength of an ear that was said to hear a lie before the liar finished shaping it. She came to end an argument. The Halcyon offensive had sat unsigned for 2 seasons, while the War College debated the butcher's arithmetic of taking a Deathworld line by conventional means, and Quietfall was the answer that let her sign it, and she had come to watch the answer work and put her name to it and go home. Warden Osk met her at the dock. Vathan watched the two of them cross the Crustier concourse on the gallery feed, the armored shieldarm and the silver aristocrat, and he watched Osk lean in and speak low and quick, and he watched the Prime Warden's silver membranes go still, then flatten, then spread wide again in a listening posture so intent it looked like hunger. Whatever Osk told her, she did not dismiss it. She stopped walking. She stood in the middle of the concourse for a long moment with her staff arranged nervously around her, and then she said something short, and Osk inclined his plated head, and they came on toward the Institute at a different pace than they had left the dock. She did not go to the gallery. She came to Vathan's ready room, alone, having left her staff at the door, and she sat across from him with her silver membrane spread and said, "The Warden tells me the weapon does not work on the animal." "It works perfectly on the animal, Prime Warden," Vathan said. "It puts her to sleep." "Show me." "I will. But first I would ask you to hear what I have learned about the archive, because the demonstration will mean nothing without it, and because—" He chose the words with the care of a man walking on ice over deep water. "Because I believe the demonstration is the second most important thing that will happen in this room today, and I would like you to know the first before you see it." Tavish regarded him with her ancient patient ear. "You have governed this institute for a long time, Resonance Master. I have never known you to waste my hearing. Speak." He spoke. He told her all of it, the run, the sleep, the whale, the naming, the origins, the 38 of 40, the 400-year-old warning filed and forgotten. He did not editorialize. He had learned long ago that the Prime Warden trusted a plain account and distrusted a shaped one, and so he laid it out like a recovery log, cold and sequential, and he watched the silver membranes as he did it, and he saw them go from wide listening to flat stillness, to something he had never seen on the face of the War College's mistress in 30 years. A slow, controlled, aristocratic dread. "You are telling me," Tavish said when he had finished, "that the arsenal of the conquered is a recording of one world's ordinary night, that we have been afraid for 400 years of the sound of a death world sleeping, and that we propose to carry that sound to the Halcyon line and play it over 4 million of these creatures as an act of war." "Yes, Prime Warden." "And that the result of doing so would not be surrender." "The result of doing so," Vathan said, "would be 4 million Deathworlders sleeping well, and then waking, and then, the human's word, going looking for whoever installed the sound. I asked her what her people do when they hear a strange thing in the dark that does not frighten them. She said the calm ones go back to sleep. She said the rest go and find out what it is. She said that on her world the ones who went and found out are the reason her species exists, and the ones who stayed by the fire are a layer in the soil." He folded his hands. "We would not be attacking the Halcyon line, Prime Warden. We would be introducing ourselves to it, loudly, and then standing next to the introduction with our return coordinates baked into the emitter firmware." The ready room was silent. Out beyond the viewport the gas giant turned its slow amber storm. "I want to hear the animal," Tavish said at last. "Not the demonstration, not the cradle. I want to sit across a table from the Deathworlder the way you have, and I want to ask it questions, and I want to hear the answers with my own membranes, because I do not sign an order to cancel a 2-season offensive on the strength of another Sethari's account, however much I trust his ear." She rose. "Bring me to it." "Prime Warden," Vathan said carefully, "she is not what you expect. She is small and tired, and she has not raised her voice once since we took her. I would ask you not to mistake the temperature of her for the size of her. Every calm-world instinct you have will tell you she is harmless. She is the most dangerous thing the conquered has ever had in a cell, and the danger is precisely that she does not seem to be." Tavish looked at him with her 30 years of governing the war arm and her ear that heard a lie before it finished. "Resonance Master," she said, "I have spent my life listening to powerful creatures pretend to be calm. I will know the difference." "That is what I'm afraid of," Vathan said. "She is not pretending." They brought the Prime Warden to the quiet cell on the crust tier, and Vathan stood at the back with Eme, while Tavish sat across the little table from Ren Kazil. And for the first time in the whole affair he watched the Deathworlder from the outside, the way the Prime Warden was seeing her, and he understood all at once how the entire galaxy had made its mistake. Because there was nothing there. That was the thing. A silver aristocrat of the oldest Sethari line, mistress of a war college, sat down across from a small, dirty, tired-eyed creature with cropped greasy hair and dirt worn into its knuckles, and every instinct 400 years of calm-world civilization had given her reported the same reading, harmless, beneath notice. A haulage animal off a courier hull. Tavish's silver membranes, spread wide to catch the truth under the words, found a slow heartbeat and easy breathing and a body entirely at rest, and read it as the War College had always read it, as the absence of threat. Vathan watched her almost relax. He watched 30 years of hearing lies tell her that this small resting thing was exactly what it appeared to be, and he wanted to say, "Do not trust the calm. The calm is the tell." But he had said it already, and she had not believed him, and she would have to hear it for herself. "You are the human," Tavish said. "I'm a human," Ren said. "One of them. There's a lot of us." She looked at the silver membranes, the aristocratic bearing, the nine-staffed gravity of the creature across the table, and Vathan saw her read it in about the time it took the Prime Warden to fail to read her. "You're the one who signs the order," Wren said. "The big one, the one they've all been waiting for." She leaned back. "You came to watch me break so you could go take my people's colonies quietly. And somebody told you on the way in that I don't break, and now you want to hear it yourself." She tilted her head. "Go ahead, ask me whatever you came to ask." Tavish's membranes flickered, the first crack in the calm, the small startle of an ear that had heard something it did not expect. She had come to interrogate. She had not expected to be summarized. "You understand your position," the Prime Warden said, recovering. "You are the single prisoner of a conquered that spans 1,000 worlds. Your colonies are undefended. Your species does not know we exist. I have come here to decide whether to erase your border in a single night, and I have not yet decided against it." Her voice was the flat, cold instrument of 30 years of command. "You would do well to be afraid of me, human." Wren looked at her for a long moment. "You know what the scariest thing I ever heard was," the human said. "It wasn't any of the sounds in that box. I've been listening to your terror archive for 2 days, and it's the best I've slept since I was a kid, and I told your master here, every one of those is just home." She sat forward, and her voice did not rise, did not sharpen, stayed exactly as flat and tired and ordinary as it had been. "The scariest thing I ever heard was my own species go quiet. One time, on a survey job way out. Something went wrong on the far side of the camp, and 40 people who'd been laughing and arguing all night just stopped, all at once, no screaming, just quiet." She held the silver aristocrat's eyes. "That's the sound you should collect if you want a real weapon. That's the one that means something's coming. Not the whale, not the fox, us, going quiet." She leaned back again. "You want to scare a human, Prime Warden, you don't play them the sound of a predator. We are the predator, we sleep to that. You want to scare a human, you take away the noise and let them figure out why it got so quiet." She spread her dirty hands, mild, unhurried, done. "But you can't do that from far away. You'd have to be close. And if you're close enough to make my people go quiet, then you're close enough that going quiet is the last thing you'll ever hear us do." The cell was silent. Prime Warden Tavish sat across the little table with her silver membrane spread wide and flat and utterly still. And Resonance Master Vathan Cell watched the mistress of the War College finally hear it, not a lie. Because there was no lie, that was the whole horror of it. The ear that caught a lie before the liar finished had nothing to catch. Because the small, tired creature across the table was telling the exact and complete truth and had been the whole time. There was no fear in her to find. There never had been. And a species with no fear in it to find was a species that 400 years of the finest terror science in the galaxy had no purchase on at all. Tavish rose from the table slowly, the way the very old rise, and she looked down at the human for a moment. And then she turned to Vathan, and her ancient voice had gone quiet in a way he had never heard it. "Show me the demonstration," the Prime Warden said. "I find I no longer wish to sign the order, but I have governed the War College for 30 years on the principle that you do not cancel a weapon you have not seen fail with your own eyes. Show me it fail." And then her silver membranes folded, the listening posture collapsing into something smaller and older. "Then you and I are going to seal the archive, Resonance Master, and we are going to have a very long and unpleasant conversation about who has been feeding us the sound of this creature's home for 400 years, and why, and where they are now." The demonstration could not simply be cancelled. That was the first thing Vathan learned about the machinery he had disturbed. A weapon that the War College had spent 2 seasons, and a great deal of political weight positioning to authorize, did not vanish because 2 old creatures and a silver aristocrat had decided in a quiet room that it was worthless. There were officers aboard now. The Prime Warden had not come alone, whatever she had left at the door of Vathan's ready room, and the officers had crossed the reach expecting to witness the crown of the arsenal prove itself, and several of them had staked careers on Quietfall, and one of them was Sub-Warden Durrell. Vathan knew Dural by reputation, the way one knows a weather front. He was fleet-armed, ambitious, young for his rank and impatient with it, and he had spent the last 2 seasons as Quietfall's loudest voice in the War College on the correct calculation that the officer who delivered a bloodless death-world conquest would not be a sub-warden for long. He came into the observation gallery ahead of the Prime Warden's party with the brisk ownership of a creature arriving at his own coronation. And when Tavish told him, flatly, in front of the assembled officers, that she was minded to cancel the offensive, Vathan watched the young sub-warden's membranes go rigid with the particular fury of a creature watching its future dismantled by its elders. On the word of the animal, Dural said, Prime Warden, with respect, you would shelve 2 seasons of the War College's work on the word of a single captured Deathworlder that claims it cannot be frightened. It is a prisoner. It says what serves it. Of course it tells us the weapon does not work. It would tell us anything that keeps that weapon off its colonies. It did not tell me the weapon does not work, Tavish said. The Resonance Master told me, and then the instrument told me. Sit down, sub-warden, and watch it fail, and if it does not fail, I will sign your order gladly. So the demonstration went ahead, not to prove Quietfall would work now, but to prove to a gallery full of the War College's ambition that it would not. And Vathan found himself in the strange position of running the crown of his life's work as an argument against itself. They brought Wren into the chamber. The gallery was full this time. A dozen officers ranged behind the glass, the Prime Warden central and still, Warden Osk a slab of armored silence at her side, Dural forward against the rail with his membranes flat. The human looked up at the gallery as she was seated on the cradle, taking in the crowd of them with the same flat professional attention she gave everything. And Vathan saw her count the officers and read the room and understand, with no apparent effort, exactly what kind of audience she had drawn. Big crowd, she said to no one as the guards fixed the restraints. The translator carried it up to the gallery. You bring everybody in for this. Proceed, Resonance Master, the Prime Warden said. Vathan opened the 9th register from the top. He had run this sequence more times than he could count, on more species than he could name, and every time the chamber had filled with the sound, and the subject had filled with terror, and the needle had climbed. Now he stood at the console with a gallery of officers behind the glass and ran the whole terrible architecture of it, the structural moan, the predator band, the layered apex skulls of 11 worlds, and watched the small dirty human on the cradle do what she had done every time. Her shoulders came down, her hands unclenched, her breathing lengthened and slowed. The tired lines of her narrow face went soft. In the gallery, the officers who had never heard the full emission on a live cradle were having their own reaction, filtered and distant through the glass and still enough to matter. Vathan saw 2 of them turn away, saw one grip the rail, saw Dural himself go a shade paler under his rigid calm. The sound reached into every creature in the gallery and found the grandmother dead and began, gently, to call it out. It reached into the human on the cradle and found nothing to call, and rocked her instead toward sleep. Second movement, Vathan said, for the gallery's benefit and brought it in. Wren yawned. It was not defiance. That was the thing the gallery could not process. Vathan watched them fail to process it in real time. Defiance they could have understood, a brave animal setting its jaw against the terror, a display of will they could respect and then break. This was not will. The human yawned the wide, unself-conscious yawn of a creature relaxing toward sleep in a safe place, her teeth appearing and vanishing. And then she settled her head against the cradle's brace and let her eyes drift half-closed. And the terror needle on the gallery wall sat below its rest peg in the register with no numbers, and Sub-Warden Dural made a sound of pure disbelief. It's drugged, Dural said. Resonance Master, you have sedated the subject to sabotage the demonstration. The subject's blood is clean, Vathan said without turning. The medics logged it an hour ago. You may read the panel yourself, Subwarden. It is on the gallery display, beside the needle that is not moving. Then it is trained, Deathworlders train. It has learned to suppress. Bring the Koran recording, said the Prime Warden. The gallery went still. Even Durrell stopped. The officers who had staked their careers on Quietfall and the officers who had merely come to watch it and the silver aristocrat who had come to sign it all fell silent together, because whatever else they disagreed on, every creature behind that glass knew what the Koran recording was, and knew that no subject had ever heard the full, unfiltered emission of it and remained a subject afterward. It was the sound at the bottom of all their nightmares. It was the reason they had come. Vathan played it. The enormous slow thing turning over in the dark came up through the moon and filled the chamber, low and vast and patient, and the gallery of officers felt it in the water of their own bodies before they heard it, and one of them, a small Velthari attaché, the same species as the long-dead science crew, sat down hard on the gallery floor and did not get up. The sound rolled through the Deepcall Institute's most terrible chamber, the worst thing the galaxy had, the whale singing to itself in deep water 400 years and 1,000 light years from any sea. On the cradle, Ren Kazel fell asleep. She went the whole way down into it, easily, a stone into still water, her chin dropping to her chest, her breath lengthening into the long, slow rhythm of true sleep, and the chamber that had been built at the cost of fleets to make sleep impossible rocked her down into the deepest rest she had found since they took her, and held her there, singing. The gallery was silent, except for the whale and the sound of a Velthari attaché breathing too fast on the floor. Vathan let it run. He let it run longer than the demonstration required, longer than was kind to the officers behind the glass, because he wanted the War College to sit in the full weight of it, to sit in the chamber of their ultimate weapon and watch it sing a Deathworlder to sleep, and to understand in their bodies what their briefings had never told them. Then he cut the emitters, and the whale stopped, and in the ringing quiet the small human on the cradle slept on undisturbed, her face slack and young and content. That proves nothing, Durrell said. His membranes had come up off his skull with the desperation of a creature watching its future burn. The Koran recording alone, one file. You have conditioned the animal to that single sound over days of exposure. Of course it sleeps to it. You have trained it like a keeper trains a beast to a bell. Prime Warden, before you cancel 2 seasons of work, I demand the full battery, not the sequenced register, the unbound emission. Everything the archive holds, layered live at maximum, all of it at once, a wall of sound no creature has ever heard because no chamber but this one could survive making it. If it is truly immune, let it prove immune to that. Vathan looked up at the young officer, and then at the Prime Warden, and the Prime Warden, after a moment, inclined her head. Build it, Resonance Master. Let him have his wall. And let him watch it fail. It took Vathan and Eme a quarter of the shift to assemble, and it was a thing that had never been attempted in the history of the discipline. The entire terror archive of the Deepcall Institute, 12,000 recordings, stripped of sequence and structure, and layered into a single unbound emission. Every apex call and death cry and deep-water horror the conquered had gathered in 400 years, stacked into one wall of sound and aimed at the small human on the cradle. The safety proctors evacuated the tiers above the chamber. The medics doubled the shielding on the gallery. Ren, when they told her what was coming, only asked whether she could lie back a little more, because the brace was catching her shoulder. They fixed the emitters at their limit, and Vathan looked at the human one last time, awake, calm, faintly bored, adjusting her shoulder against the brace, and then he opened everything at once. The unbound emission came out of the chamber like a physical event. It was not a sound so much as a place, a solid architecture of terror, every horror of the archive standing up at once and speaking together, and it hit the gallery through triple shielding and put 2 more officers on the floor, and drove the Velthari attaché out of the room entirely with both hands clamped to the sides of his head. It was the loudest and most terrible thing the Deep Call Institute had ever produced, the sum of 400 years, the whole collected nightmare of the galaxy compressed into one unbroken wall. And Vathan, at the console, made himself watch the human instead of the needle. Wren's eyes were half closed. As the wall came up, she tilted her head, listening, the way a person listens to a familiar piece of music to pick out the individual instruments, and Vathan saw her lips move, and he opened the cradle's close channel to hear what a Deathworlder said in the heart of the worst sound the galaxy could make. She was naming them. "That's the fox again and the big cat, and is that a wolf? That's a wolf. Whole pack." Her voice was slow and thick and unbothered, threading through the wall of terror like someone walking a path they had walked 1,000 times in the dark. "Screech owl, another owl, bull gator, that's elk in the fall, that's the bugling, coyotes, loons. Somebody in here's got a thunderstorm, a real one, you can hear it coming across the water." Her head settled deeper into the brace. "And the whale way down at the bottom under everything, holding it all up." She exhaled, long and slow. "You put my whole planet in one room and turned it all the way up, Master. It's the loudest night I ever heard." Her breathing lengthened. Her voice trailed toward sleep. "Sounds like the whole world came out to sing at once. Sounds like being 6 years old on the porch in July. And then, barely, leave a window cracked, would you? It's nice." Resonance Master Vathan's cell stood at the console in the middle of the unbound emission. 400 years of terror at maximum, the wall that had emptied the gallery, and watched the small, dirty Deathworlder fall asleep inside it, smiling, and understood that there was no bottom. There was no sound they could make. There was nothing in the archive, nothing in the science, nothing in 400 years of the finest terror work in the galaxy that could reach the creature on the cradle, because everything they had was the sound of the one place in the universe where she was safe. He cut the emitters. The wall collapsed into silence. And the human slept on in the ringing quiet, 6 years old on a porch in July, while a gallery of the War College's finest picked themselves up off the floor. "Wake it," Dural said. His voice had gone thin. "Wake it up and I will show you it is faking. I will put my own sidearm against its skull and we will see how deeply the Deathworlder sleeps then." "You will do nothing of the kind," the Prime Warden said, and her ancient voice did not rise, and the whole gallery heard the War College's mistress put a full stop at the end of a young officer's career. "Subwarden Dural, you have seen the weapon fail. You have seen it fail on the worst recording we own in front of a dozen witnesses on a clean subject. Quietfall is already deployed," Dural said. The gallery went very still. Vathan turned from the console. He looked up at the young subwarden pressed against the gallery rail with his membranes flat and his future in ruins, and he watched Dural play the last card of an ambitious creature who could not accept that the thing he had staked his life on was worthless. Watched him reach for the one fact in the room that might still make him right. "What did you say?" the Prime Warden said. "A Pathfinder," Dural said. "A single emitter buoy, authorized under my standing survey warrant 6 weeks ago before this council convened. We seated it in the dark near the human listening post at the edge of the Halcyon Reach, the forward station, the one that watches the trade filament. It has been broadcasting the 9th register on a loop for 6 weeks. His membranes came up, the fury turning to something like triumph. "A field trial, Prime Warden, real Deathworlders, real colonists, not one captured freak on a cradle. And in 6 weeks the human listening post has not gone dark, has not signaled distress, has not evacuated. So either the weapon does nothing, in which case we have wasted 2 seasons, or it is doing exactly what it should, and the panic reports are still crossing the reach toward us. Either way, the field data is real, and it is more than the word of a sleeping animal, and I say we wait for it before this council throws away the arsenal on." Ren Kazil woke up. Predators do that. The change in the gallery's air, the shift in the room's whole voice, had pulled her up out of the deep sleep in one clean motion, and she was awake and already listening before anyone noticed she had surfaced, her eyes open and moving over the gallery, and Vathan watched her catch the last of it. 6 weeks, forward station, broadcasting on a loop, and he watched the flat professional attention on her narrow face go somewhere he had not seen it go before. It went still, not the resting stillness, a different one, the stillness of a creature that has heard in the dark beyond the fire a sound it needs to understand. "Say that again," Wren said. The gallery ignored her. Durrell was still talking, still pressing his case to the Prime Warden, and the officers were murmuring, and no one was listening to the animal on the cradle. And Vathan watched the small human sit very still in her restraints and wait, patiently, for the room to be finished, the way a person waits out a noise they have already understood. "You put a speaker," Wren said, into the next gap, and her voice was so flat and quiet that the translator barely caught it. And then the whole gallery caught it, because the room had gone quiet around her the way rooms do, next to the station on the edge of the reach. "And you've been playing the whale over it. For 6 weeks. The subject will be silent," Durrell began. "Which station?" Wren said. "You do not question." "Which station?" She had not raised her voice. She had lowered it, and there was something in the lowering of it, some drop in the temperature of the small, dirty creature on the cradle, that reached the gallery in a way 400 years of the 9th Register never had, and Subwarden Durrell, who had faced down the War College and the Prime Warden herself, stopped talking and answered the animal. "The forward listening post," he said. "Halcyon Watch, the station that monitors the trade filament." "That's not a listening post," Wren said. "That's a school." She was looking at nothing now, her tired eyes fixed on the middle distance, doing the arithmetic. "Halcyon Watch is where the boarder families send their kids for the survey certificate. My cousin's boy is up there. 200, 300 people, half of them under 20, learning to read deep space returns." She came back from the middle distance and found Durrell in the gallery and held him. "And you've been broadcasting the most beautiful sound in the galaxy over the top of them for 6 weeks, and you don't understand why they haven't panicked and run." She almost smiled, and it was the worst thing Vathan had ever seen on her face, because there was still no anger in it. "They haven't run because they love it. 300 kids at a survey school have been sleeping better than they ever have in their lives for 6 weeks, listening to a sound from home that nobody can explain, coming from somewhere out in the dark." She said it very gently. "And they're a survey school, Subwarden. You put an unexplained signal in front of 300 people whose entire job is to find where signals come from." She let it sit. "How long ago did the sound start?" The gallery had gone silent. Durrell's membranes had begun, slowly, to flatten. 6 weeks, he said. "Then they've already found you," Wren said. "Or they're most of the way here. You didn't run a field trial, Subwarden. You lit a candle in a dark window and left it burning for 6 weeks over a station full of the most curious animals in the galaxy, and every one of them has spent 6 weeks lying awake at the end of the shift thinking, isn't that the most wonderful thing? I wonder where it's coming from." She settled back against the cradle and closed her eyes, and Vathan understood that she was not resting. She was listening, the way her whole species listened, for the thing coming through the dark. "You want to know if your weapon works," she said, without opening her eyes. "Go and look at your buoy. I'll bet you anything you own it's already gone quiet. And I'll bet the reason it went quiet is that somebody from Halcyon Watch already flew out there to see what was making the pretty sound, and found your speaker, and switched it off, and took it apart to find out who built it." She opened her eyes and looked at the Prime Warden, and only at the Prime Warden, as if she had decided that Tavish was the only creature in the room worth spending the truth on. "And now they've got a conquered emitter buoy in a survey school workshop, and a heading, and 300 bored curious kids who just found out there's somebody out here who's been putting speakers next to their school. That's not a field trial, ma'am. That's an introduction. And you don't get to decide what happens next. You already sent the invitation. 6 weeks ago." The chamber was silent. On the gallery floor, the Velthari attaché had gotten up. Subwarden Durrell stood at the rail with his membranes flat against his skull and his triumph gone to ash, and Prime Warden Tavish sat very still and old in her seat above the chamber, and Resonance Master Vathan Sel stood at the console of his life's work and felt the last of the ground go out from under 400 years. "Warden Osk," the Prime Warden said at last. Her voice was quiet and even. "Find that buoy. Now, this shift. I want to know if it is still broadcasting, and if it is not, I want to know when it stopped, and I want the last returns from every picket between here and the Halcyon Reach on my table before the next cycle." She rose. "And someone get the Deathworlder off that cradle and give it a chair and something to eat. Because, unless I am very much mistaken, it is the only creature in conquered space that knows what is coming, and I find I would like it comfortable when it explains it to me." The buoy had gone dark 19 days ago. Warden Osk brought the return himself, up to the Institute's council room where the Prime Warden had convened what was left of her party, and he laid it on the table without ceremony. The emitter buoy at the edge of the Halcyon Reach had broadcast the 9th register on a continuous loop for 23 days, and then, 19 days ago, mid-cycle, without any command from conquered space, it had stopped. Not failed. Stopped. Its last telemetry showed the power core intact, the emitter array intact, and then a manual shutdown executed locally, followed by a physical disconnection of the broadcast unit, followed by silence. "Somebody flew out to it," Osk said, "and turned it off with their hands and unbolted the speaker and took it away. 19 days ago." He looked at Wren, who sat at the foot of the council table with a bowl of conquered, grain paste the medics had cleared for her, eating it slowly and without complaint. "The animal called it before we had the return." "It's not hard," Wren said around the food. She swallowed. "You put a mystery next to a survey school. Somebody was always going to go and solve it." She set the spoon down. 19 days, okay, that's the number that matters. "Where's your nearest picket to the Halcyon Reach? And when did it last report clean?" The Prime Warden did not tell the animal to be silent. She looked at Osk. "Answer it." Osk pulled the picket returns. There were 4 sensor pickets strung along the frontier between conquered space and the Halcyon Reach, unmanned, automated, reporting on a schedule. Vathan watched the Warden read them, and watched the armored creature go still. "Picket 4 last reported clean 6 days ago," Osk said. "Its scheduled report 2 days ago did not arrive. Picket 3's most recent report is..." He stopped. "Picket 3 logged a transit contact 11 days ago. A single small vessel, low-mass, human drive signature, moving inbound at survey speed, no weapon signature, making no attempt to hide. The picket flagged it as a probable civilian survey craft off course and filed it at low priority. No one reviewed the flag." He set the reader down. "It has been inbound for 11 days, toward us." "One boat," Durrell said from the far end of the table. He had not been dismissed. The Prime Warden had kept him in the room, Vathan suspected, so that he would have to hear all of it. "A single unarmed survey craft. Prime Warden, whatever the animal claims, a single civilian boat is not a threat to." "How many people on a survey boat?" the Prime Warden asked. She did not ask Durrell, she asked Wren. "Depends," Wren said. "That range off a school station, 2, maybe 3. She picked the spoon back up. "Couple of kids and maybe an instructor if they're being careful." "Probably just the kids if they're not," she ate. "You're all looking at that like it's good news. One little boat, 2 or 3 people, no guns. You're thinking, well, that we can handle." She looked up and the room quieted. "You're thinking about it wrong. You've been thinking about it wrong the whole time, and I've been trying to tell you, and you keep hearing what you want to hear because you're calm world people and you can't help it." She set the spoon down again, and she folded her dirty hands on the table, and she spoke to them the way you speak to people you need to keep alive. "Here's what I need you to understand," Wren said. "You didn't send a threat and get a threat back. You sent a wonder. You put a beautiful, impossible, comforting sound out in the dark over a school full of curious kids, and one of them, maybe two, loved it so much and wondered about it so hard that they took a survey boat and followed it home. That's what's inbound. Not a warship, not a strike. A kid in a small boat who heard something wonderful and couldn't stop thinking about where it came from, flying straight at you at survey speed with no weapons and no fear, because it never once occurred to them to be afraid, because you played them the sound of home. She let that sit. And here is the part you really need to hear. If you meet that boat with a picket and a weapons lock, if you do the calm world thing and treat the curious kid in the unarmed boat as a threat and put a shot across them or worse, then you will have taken a child who came out here full of wonder and killed them for it. And the sound you should be afraid of, the one I told the Prime Warden about, the one that means something's coming, my whole species going quiet, that sound will start at Halcyon Watch, and it will roll back along the border faster than you can imagine, and it will not be curious when it gets to you. She spread her hands. You have exactly one move here, and it's the one that's hardest for people like you. When that boat gets here, you don't lock weapons and you don't send a warning and you don't posture. You let it come, and you let me talk to it. Because right now there is exactly one person in conquered space who can explain to a scared, curious kid in a small boat why there was a speaker playing home out in the dark, and why the people who made it are not going to hurt them, and it's the animal you've been keeping in a cell. She picked the spoon back up and returned to her grain paste. So I'd feed me, and I'd get me a calm channel, and I'd stop calling me in it. The council room was silent for a long moment. You would have us, Dural said slowly, hand the Deathworlder a live channel to an incoming human vessel. It would signal its people. It would give them our position, our strength, everything. They already have your position, Ren said, without looking up. You gave it to them. It's baked into the buoy firmware. That's what 19 days of a survey school workshop taking your speaker apart gets you, she ate. I keep telling you, you already sent the invitation. All I'm offering to do is be at the door when they arrive, so nobody gets shot in the hallway. Vothan watched the Prime Warden, and he saw the moment the War College's mistress made her decision. It was not a dramatic thing. Her silver membranes, spread wide in the listening posture, simply folded down into the smaller, quieter set of a creature that has finished listening and begun to think. And she looked down the length of the table at the small, dirty human eating grain paste at the foot of it, and she inclined her ancient head a fraction, the way she might to an equal. Feed it, she said, feed her. Give her the channel when the vessel is in range, on my authority and under my hand, and if she signals anything to that boat but what we have agreed, the responsibility is mine. She rose. Subwarden Dural, you will stand down your pickets. No weapons locks, no warnings. The vessel comes in clean or it does not come in at all. And if a single conquered gun so much as tracks that boat without my order, the officer responsible will spend the rest of a long life regretting it. Is that understood? Prime Warden. Is that understood? Dural's membranes flattened. Understood. Good, Tavish turned to Vothan, Resonance Master. Walk with me. They walked the crustier concourse under the amber light of the gas giant, the old aristocrat and the old scientist, and for a while the Prime Warden did not speak. Vothan had governed the Institute long enough to know when silence was an instruction to wait, and he waited. I have signed 411 orders in 30 years, Tavish said finally. Reductions, deterrence, the quiet taking of loud worlds. I have never lost sleep over any of them because the science was sound and the arithmetic was sound and the ninth register spared more blood than it spent. I believe that. I believe it still, for every world we took. She stopped at the great viewport and looked out at the storm. And now you tell me that the entire science was a gift. That someone with a grudge against a death world, or a love for it, or a purpose I cannot even guess at, spent 400 years feeding my institute the ordinary sounds of one planet's night and letting us build a doctrine on our own terror. Someone made a weapon of my fear, Resonance Master, and handed it to me, and let me carry it across the reach for 30 years, and I never once asked whose hand it came from. She turned her ancient head. Who does that? Who has that kind of patience? I do not know, Prime Warden. Neither do I, and that is the second thing that will keep me awake now. She was quiet a moment. The human said her people did not do it, that her species does not even know we are out here. I believe her, my ear finds no lie in her, none. It is the most unnerving thing I have encountered in a long life. So it was not the Deathworlders, someone else. Someone who knew the Deathworld intimately, who could walk its nights and gather its sounds, who had access to our recovery routes and our salvage patterns, and knew exactly which dead ships we would find. Someone who wanted the conquered to spend 400 years terrified of the sound of Earth. She looked at Vathan. To what end, Resonance Master, who profits from a galaxy that fears a Deathworld's night and never once thinks to ask where the night comes from? Vathan had been turning the same question in the dark of his own skull for days, and he had found only the shape of an answer, and he did not like it. Someone who wanted us afraid of the Deathworld, he said slowly, but not curious about it. Consider it, Prime Warden. Fear and curiosity are not the same. A creature that fears a thing keeps away from it. It builds walls and weapons, and it never goes and looks. For 400 years the conquered has feared the sound of Earth, and fearing it has kept its distance, has never sent a survey to grade Umbranine, never opened contact, never gone and looked at the world the sounds came from. We took the fear and we called it wisdom, and we stayed away. He watched the storm turn. Whoever assembled the archive did not want the Deathworlders attacked, Prime Warden. An attack would have brought contact. They wanted the Deathworlders left alone, undisturbed, unvisited. They spent 400 years making sure the one power in this arm of the galaxy that might have gone and knocked on Earth's door was too frightened of the sound to do it. He was quiet a moment. They were not building us a weapon. They were building the Deathworld a wall, and we were the wall. The Prime Warden was silent for a long time. Then it has failed, she said at last, whatever it was. Because a child in a small boat has come through the wall from the other side, and it came not out of fear and not out of war, but because we were foolish enough to play the sound where the Deathworlders could hear it too. And now the one thing the archive's maker spent 4 centuries preventing is 19 days from arriving at my institute, and I am going to stand at the door and let it in. She made the low sound that on a Sethari of her caste passed for something between a laugh and a grief. 400 years of the finest patience I have ever encountered, Resonance Master, undone by one ambitious boy and a speaker in the dark. I almost admire the size of the mistake. Subwarden Durrell's mistake, Prime Warden. No, she said, ours, the whole Concord's. The mistake was never asking. 400 years of the sound in our vaults, and not one of us ever thought to wonder what the animals sounded like to the animals. We heard terror because we were built to hear terror, and we never once considered that to something, somewhere, the worst sound in our galaxy might be a lullaby. She turned from the viewport. The human has been trying to tell us that since the first cycle, we are only now large enough to hear it. She began to walk again, back toward the council tier, and Vathan fell in beside her. 19 days, she said. See that the Deathworlder is rested and fed and ready, Resonance Master. When that boat arrives, I want her sharp. Everything now depends on the calmest creature in conquered space staying calm at the door, and on the rest of us being wise enough to let her keep it. Vathan spent the days that followed doing the strangest work of his long career, which was preparing for a first contact by learning how to make one small Deathworlder comfortable. He moved her on his own authority, out of the cell and into a suite of empty quarters on the crust tier with a viewport and a door she could open herself, and he did not post a guard on it. And when Amet asked him whether that was wise, he said that a locked door taught the human they were afraid, and a species you could not frighten learned nothing so fast as who was afraid of it, and he would rather she learned they were not. It was mostly a lie. He was afraid, but he had understood, somewhere in the days of naming the sounds, that fear was the one currency the human could not be paid in and could not be threatened with, and that the only way to deal with a creature immune to fear was to stop trafficking in it entirely, to be, instead, honest and useful and calm. So he was honest with her. He told her about the picket returns as they came in. He told her when picket 4 went fully dark and when the inbound contact crossed the line where a conquered strike could still have caught it clean and passed it and became a thing that could only be met at the door. He told her that Subwarden Durrell had been relieved of his survey warrant and confined to quarters, and that half the War College wanted the boat destroyed the moment it entered range regardless of the Prime Warden's order, and that Tavish was spending her strength holding them off, and that he did not know, honestly, whether she could hold them all the way to the door. Wren listened to all of it, sitting at the viewport with her knees pulled up, watching the storm. She had cleaned up in the days of the suite. The greasy captivity had washed off her and left a young woman with a narrow, tired face, and a scar through one eyebrow and dirt still worn permanently into the creases of her knuckles where no washing would reach it. She looked, Vathun thought, almost ordinary. He had stopped being fooled by it. Prime Warden's all right, Wren said on the 17th day. For somebody who came here to erase my border, she's the only one of you who actually changed her mind instead of just getting scared. She watched the storm. That's rare. You have no idea how rare. Most people, you show them they're wrong about something this big, they don't change their mind, they just get frightened and mean. She glanced at him. You changed yours too. That first day in the cell, you looked at me like I was a broken instrument. Now you bring me the picket returns. She almost smiled. What changed? Vathun considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. I spent 400 years believing that fear was the deepest thing in the galaxy, he said. That everything alive had it under the skin and that a clever enough mind could always find it and reach it. It was the ground I stood on, and then I met a creature with none and I did not fall. He looked at the storm. I thought when the ground went that I would fall. Everyone at the Institute is falling. You can see it in them. But I found there was something under the fear after all, something I had never had reason to look for because the fear had always been enough. He was quiet a moment. Curiosity, I think. The thing your kind has instead. I found I would rather understand you than be afraid of you. It is a poorer weapon than fear, but it is a great deal better company. Wren looked at him for a while. Yeah, she said softly, and turned back to the storm. That's the one that got us off the planet, not the teeth. The teeth just kept us alive long enough. She pulled her knees up tighter. Everybody out here thinks we're dangerous because of the teeth. We're dangerous because of the other thing. The teeth mean we don't die of the dark. The other thing means we walk into it. She watched the amber bands turn. Your buoy didn't scare anybody at Halcyon Watch, Master. It made them curious. And a curious human is the most dangerous animal in the galaxy, because there is no wall high enough and no dark deep enough to keep one on its own side of anything. She rested her chin on her knees. Somewhere out there right now there's a kid in a little boat who heard the most beautiful sound in the world coming out of empty space and couldn't let it go and pointed their nose at it and just went. No weapons, no backup, no fear, just had to know. Her tired eyes reflected the storm. That's us, Master. That's the whole species right there in one boat, not the whale, the kid who followed it home. The boat arrived on the 21st day, and it came in exactly as Wren had said it would, slow, unhidden, unarmed. A small human survey craft with a cold water drive signature, ambling into the Deep Call Institute's approach lanes at a speed that suggested its pilot had all the time in the worlds and nothing at all to fear. Vathun stood at the docking gallery with the Prime Warden, and Warden Osk, and Wren Kazil, and a channel open to every gun station in the Institute. And he watched 200 years of conquered terror doctrine hang on whether a room full of frightened officers could keep their hands still, while a child steered a toy into their harbor. There it is, Wren said. She was at the viewport close to the glass, watching the little boat come. She had gone very still, and Vathun realized, watching her, that she was not calm now the way she had been calm on the cradle. That had been the stillness of a creature at rest. This was the other stillness, the alert one, the whole animal focused down to a point, because whatever else was out in that boat, it was one of hers, and it had flown 21 days into the dark on the strength of a beautiful sound, and everything now depended on the next few minutes going right. Small boat, Survey rig. That's a halcyon hull. Her breath fogged the glass. That's one of ours. Weapon stations report locked and holding, said the channel, in the flat voice of the Institute's defense officer. Prime Warden on your order. No order, Tavish said. Hold. Every station holds until I speak or until I am dead, and if I am dead you will hold anyway. Resonance Master, give the human the channel. Vathun opened the channel and handed the small human a calm piece, and Ren Kazel took it in her dirty hands and looked at it for a moment. And then she did a thing that Vathun would remember for the rest of his life. She closed her eyes and she breathed, slow and deliberate, and she brought herself down. He watched her do it, watched her put the alert stillness away and reach back into the resting stillness on purpose, because she understood in a way no calm world creature ever could have, that the child in that boat would hear everything under her voice, and that the one thing she could not let it hear was fear. She made herself the sound of home. Then she opened her eyes and keyed the channel. Halcyon survey boat, she said, and her voice came out warm and easy and unhurried, the voice of someone calling across a yard on an ordinary evening. This is Ren Kazel, out of Meridian Salvage Registry, and I'm going to guess you're a long way from where you're supposed to be. Talk to me. The channel crackled, and then a voice came back, and it was younger than Vathun had braced for, a boy's voice, cracking at the edges with exhaustion and wonder, and the particular stubborn calm of a death-world adolescent who had flown 3 weeks into the unknown and would have died before admitting it had cost him anything. This is Survey Trainee del Aconquo Halcyon Watch, the boy said. I'm a long way out. A pause. There was a sound coming from out here. Nobody could figure out where it came from, and everybody said leave it, and the voice steadied, defended itself. I took a boat. I know I wasn't supposed to. I just had to know what it was. Ren closed her eyes again briefly, and Vathun saw something move across her face that had nothing to do with strategy, an old, tired, helpless fondness, the look of someone recognizing her whole species in a single stubborn child. Then it was gone, and she was easy again. Yeah, she said. I know you did. Course you did. She leaned against the glass. Del, listen to me. I found out what the sound was. It's a good story, and I'm going to tell you the whole thing, but first I need you to do something for me, and I need you to trust me on it even though you don't know me. Can you do that? Yeah. There are people out here, Ren said. The ones who made the sound. They're not human. They're the reason I've been out of contact. They picked me up a few weeks back, and I've been staying with them, and Del, I need you to hear this part real clear. They are not going to hurt you. They're scared of us, which is a whole thing I'll explain, but scared isn't the same as dangerous, and the one who's in charge out here is holding every gun on this station still so you can come in safe. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to keep coming, nice and slow, right at the docking beacon I'm about to light up for you, and you're not going to do anything sudden, and nobody's going to do anything sudden back. And in about 10 minutes you and I are going to be standing in the same room, and you're going to be the first human being in history to shake hands with these people, and it's going to be because you couldn't leave a mystery alone. Her voice warmed. Which is the most human thing I ever heard, so don't you dare apologize for it. You copy. A long pause. Then steadier than before the boy said, copy, coming in slow. And then, because he was young and a deathworlder and could not quite help it, is the sound, do you know what made it? The real thing, I've got it recorded. I've been listening to it every night. It sounds like, he struggled for it. It sounds like something huge but not scary, like it's just singing to itself. In the dark. Ren opened her eyes and looked out at the little boat coming slow toward the beacon, and when she answered him, her voice was very gentle. It's a whale, Del, she said. It's a blue whale from home, biggest thing that ever lived on Earth, and it never hurt a soul in its life. It just sings. She watched the boat come. You flew 3 weeks into the dark chasing a whale song. Your mother's going to have a lot to say about that. And then softer, not for the channel, barely for the room, good boy. Come on home. The little boat came in slow. right down the beacon lane, past 200 years of held conquered fire, and docked at the Deep Call Institute without a shot fired. And Resonance Master Vathan Cell stood at the gallery and watched the airlock cycle and watched a tall, thin, exhausted human boy of perhaps 16 standard years step out into a galaxy that had spent 4 centuries being afraid of the sound of his home. And watched him look around at the towering gray Sethari and the armored warden and the silver aristocrat with frank, tired, fearless curiosity, and then find Ren Kazil in the crowd of them, and go to her, and let her put an arm around his narrow shoulders, and say, in the small voice of a child who has been brave for 3 weeks and can finally stop, "I really wasn't supposed to take the boat." "I know," Ren said. "You did good. You did real good." And she looked over the boy's head at the Prime Warden of the War College, and the two of them, the silver aristocrat who had come to erase a border and the small, dirty salvage pilot who had talked a child through it, held each other's gaze for a long moment over the head of the most dangerous thing in the galaxy, which was a curious 16-year-old who had followed a song, and something passed between them that did not need translating. It ended, as the largest things do, in paperwork and quiet. There was no treaty, not then. That came later and was someone else's long labor. What happened at the Deep Call Institute in the days after the boat docked was smaller and colder, and Vathan thought, more important. The Prime Warden opened a channel to Halcyon watch through the boy's own boat, carefully, with Ren at the center of every word, and let the survey school know that its lost trainee was alive and safe and in remarkable company, and let the border learn, one careful transmission at a time, that the thing on the other side of the wall was not a horror but a frightened, ancient, apologetic conquered that had been afraid of them for 400 years for no reason any human could quite make sense of. The going quiet that Ren had warned of never started. There was nothing in the end to go quiet about. You cannot dread what comes to your door holding your lost child and saying, in effect, "We are sorry. We did not know, please, tell us how not to frighten you." Quietfall was dead. The Prime Warden killed it herself, formally, with her own hand and seal, and did not pretend it was anything but what it was, the abandonment of the crown of the conquered's arsenal, the admission that the War College had spent 400 years, an untold fortune weaponizing a lullaby. Subwarden Dural was not executed, which surprised Vathan. The Prime Warden said that killing the boy who had accidentally ended a war by lighting a candle in a dark window would be its own kind of foolishness, and that Dural would serve out a long, quiet, humiliating career somewhere the War College would never have to look at him, and that this was worse. And the archive was sealed. Vathan did it himself, because it was his to do. He went down into the vault where 400 years of a stolen planet's ordinary nights lay catalogued as terror, 12,000 recordings. The collected lullabies of a world that had never known its cradle songs had been carried into the dark and made into a weapon. And he sealed it, locked the emitters, encrypted the catalog, closed the whole terrible science of the Deep Call Institute behind a door that would not open again in his lifetime. The War College would want it someday. There would be another ambitious young officer, in another generation, who would look at the sealed vault and think there is a weapon in there, and who would have to be told, patiently, by whoever governed the Institute then, that there was not, that there had never been, that behind the door was only the sound of a death world sleeping, and that the one thing you must never, ever do with such a sound is play it where the death worlders can hear you play it. He kept one recording out. He told himself it was for the record, that some file had to remain unsealed, for the historians, for the treaty that was coming, for the long work of explaining to the conquered how it had frightened itself for 4 centuries. That was mostly a lie, too. He kept the Koran recording, the whale, the enormous slow patient thing turning over in the deep, and on the night before Ren Kazil and the boy Del Aconquo left the Institute to begin the long-escorted journey home, he sat alone in the sealed vault with the emitters dark and played it, once, at low volume for himself. He had heard it 1,000 times. He had heard it as the worst sound in the galaxy, the anchor of his life's work, the thing at the bottom of every nightmare the Institute had ever sold. He sat in the dark and listened to it as what it was. Now, finally, a great gentle animal singing to itself in deep water, content at rest, harming nothing. 400 years and 1,000 light years from any sea. Its song carried out into the black by a hand no one had ever identified and turned, by frightened people who did not understand it, into a weapon. And Vathan found, sitting there, that the sound no longer frightened him at all. It only made him tired and a little sad, and he noticed this with something like wonder. It made him want, for the first time in his long, careful, fearful life, to sleep. He understood, then, what the human had been trying to tell him from the first cycle. It was not that the Deathworlders were fearless because they were strong. It was that they had made a home of the exact dark that the rest of the galaxy had spent its whole evolutionary childhood fleeing, that they had walked into the night that every other living thing ran from, and lain down in it, and slept, and woken curious and gone deeper. The whale was not a weapon and had never been a weapon. It was a lullaby. And a species that could hear the worst thing in the galaxy and think only that's just home. That means the night is ordinary. That means I'm safe enough to sleep. That was not a species you could ever frighten or deter or wall away in the dark. That was a species that would keep walking into the dark forever, one curious child in one small boat at a time, until there was no dark left anywhere that did not have a human asleep in it, at peace, dreaming of a sound from home. Wren came to the vault before she left. She stood in the doorway with the boy waiting somewhere behind her, and listened for a moment to the whale still turning over low in the dark, and something eased in her narrow face. "You kept the good one," she said. "I kept the good one." "Yeah," she leaned against the doorframe. "You should hang on to that. Everybody should have one sound that means home." She looked at the sealed vault, the 12,000 locked lullabies, the dead crown of a dead science. "You did all right, Master." For somebody whose whole life turned out to be pointed the wrong way, most people can't turn around that fast. She pushed off the frame. "The Prime Warden's cutting us loose. Dell wants to see the whales when he gets home, real ones in the water. I told him I'd take him out to the coast." She almost smiled. "First night out there he won't sleep at all. Says the ocean sounds like something breathing." She shrugged. "Then he'll stop hearing it, and it'll just mean he's home." She lifted a hand, the old dirt worn permanent into the knuckles, and then she was gone, and Vathan sat alone in the sealed vault a while longer with the whale singing low in the dark. Then he turned it off, and the vault went silent, and the silence, for the first time in 400 years, held nothing in it to be afraid of. He rose slowly, the way the very old rise, and he went up out of the dark to see the last two humans in conquered space off at the door, the tired young woman who had slept through the end of the world, and the curious boy who had followed a song across the black to find it. He watched their small boat light its cold water drive and swing out toward home, unhurried, unafraid, and he stood at the gallery long after it had gone, an old creature who had spent his life listening for the sound at the bottom of everyone's fear, and had found, at the very bottom, only a great gentle animal singing to itself in the deep, and a small tired species that had heard it and decided it was safe enough at last to close its eyes.